We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Do we have any public comment on non-agenda items?
No such comment.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get the update on the state legislation.
Okay. I have a PowerPoint to share, so I'll put it up.
Let me make sure you can actually do that. And just so everyone knows, do we need to do a round of introductions for the students, or do we feel like we're in pretty good shape here?
Sure, we can. Well, I think we all know David. We should know, well, I guess we should know everybody.
Maybe it's just Kelly.
We know
Hi, Kelly.
Mackenzie. We know Kelly. Okay.
Okay,
Well,
great.
go
We're
ahead
good.
and introduce yourself then.
Okay, I guess I'll introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here today. I'm the Vice President of External Affairs, so I run the lobby committee, and this is super exciting because I love to see admin support in lobbying. And that's
Great.
And just for the benefit of the students, Dale Shimasaki is our lobbyist in Sacramento. He works with Strategic Education Strategies. Is that name right, Dale? Did I get that right?
Strategic Education Services.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, Strategic Strategies would be a little repetitive.
Yeah, right.
But so Dale's our guy at the Capitol, and will be walking us through a briefing on the legislative picture up there.
Okay, so you can see the PowerPoint now?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. So when the legislature reconvened in December, their intention was to convene a regular session, a business as usual session. So they adopted a calendar to reflect that in the hopes that they could maneuver through the pandemic. But as you know, with the increase in cases and the increased hospitalization, that didn't happen. And even though they were supposed to come back on the 4th, they delayed their return to the legislature. So they didn't come back until the 11th, as we show on the calendar here. So the intent, again, is to try to conduct business as usual, but the caveat is, to be determined or adjustments to be made as necessary. It's going to be one of those situations like last year where they have to sort of take it a step at a time. And just for background for you, in the last election, the California Democrats retained its majority, its strong majority in the Assembly and the Senate. As you can see, the Democrats in the Assembly and Senate have over a 70% majority. So theoretically, if they wanted to have two pass tax initiatives or special budget allocations or pass emergency legislation, they could do it because they have stronger than a 2/3 vote. I should note that there are 2 vacancies right now in the Senate. Holly Mitchell from Los Angeles won her Board of Supervisors seat, so her seat is vacant. Sydney Camlogger Dove, who's the assemblywoman from that area, has already declared that she's a candidate. I think there's a handful of other candidates. You're down in the LA area, so you may know some of the other candidates, but
which was always the design, to get Sydney Camlogger Dove into Holly Mitchell's seat.
Yeah,
so all is going according to plan.
Right. So so that election is going to be on May 4th. And as you know, as we'll show in the next slide, Shirley Weber from San Diego, she got appointed Secretary of State. So there's a vacancy in that seat. They have not called the election yet. The governor hasn't called it yet, but that will soon follow. But just to let you know, there's 2 candidates that have declared so far. There's a Latina from labor groups, and I forgot her name, but she's already declared. And Shirley Weber's daughter, who's a physician, has declared for the seat as well. Turning to other information on the elections, there's been appointments, as you know, to state legislative and constitutional offices. The governor appointed Alex Padilla to the U.S. Senate. He was the Secretary of State. And to backfill on Alex Padilla's position, he appointed Shirley Weber, Assemblywoman from San Diego, and she was the chairwoman of the Black Legislative Caucus. she got appointed to the position of Secretary of State. So as we mentioned in the last slide, that creates 2 vacancies in the 79th district and the 30th district. And to recap what Erica was saying earlier, before we started the meeting, that the governor's recall election is gaining, or recall effort is gaining some momentum. Over 1 million signatures have been gathered. They're targeting to get 500,000 more to qualify. I think the 800,000 figure that's been mentioned is to ensure that they have enough signatures to qualify. But 500 is the number of additional qualified signatures that they need to get this place on the ballot. If it does get on the ballot, or if it does get certified on the signatures, the election can be held, it looks like it will be in June or July. And for those of you who may have been involved in some of the recalls before, the first question is, should the incumbent be recalled, yes or no? And then the second question is, who would you like to be governor in the event that the governor is recalled? This was a similar situation that happened to Gray Davis when he was the incumbent, and the winner of that election was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So it remains to be seen. Now, the implications of this is, if the recall election goes into effect in June or July, that just creates a significant chaos, if you will, in the legislative process, because in May and June, as you know, that's where the heat of the budget discussions and budget negotiations take place. And with the recall going on, the governor's time may be, and his attention span may not be as focused on the budget as it might be on his survival over the recall. So that will be a concern in trying on the ability to conduct quote unquote business as usual. I showed on the first slide here that we're just at the start of the legislative process. As you can see here, January 22nd is the last day you submit bill requests. So legislators are putting in their bill ideas to Legislative Council to put into legal language to have as bills for introduction. And February 19th is the day for actual bills to be introduced in the legislature. So I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of bills that have been introduced already, but this isn't an exhaustive list because bills will be introduced between now and February 19th. And towards the tail end of February 19th, we get hundreds of bills in print and we'll look through them. And so for your next legislative meeting, we can have a real extensive list of legislation for you to look at. But I just want to pick out a few select bills that will be of interest to your district and the community colleges at large. So in the Assembly, there's 3 bills that sort of reflect where thinking is going to be. The first 2 are related to broadband legislation. There's increased concern about the access to broadband and internet connectivity in the schools and higher education systems. Getting devices to the students was the first step. Now that process has taken place, the next concern is how do you connect and how do you ensure that folks have connectivity. To that end, AB 14, Assemblywoman Aguiar Curry has broadband legislation. It's a grant program to access funds from the PUC on broadband. And in the grant program, it allows community colleges to apply for grants and compete for funds out of the grant program. Assemblymember Murasucci has a bond bill, a general obligation bond for broadband that would go on the 2022 election. And then on school facilities for K-12 and community colleges, Assemblymember O'Donnell has a bond act that would take place in the 2022 election. He does not put an appropriation in it yet, but as the bill moves through, he'll think about what kind of, what's the appropriate dollar figure to include for that measure. In the
Dale,
Senate,
really quick, Dale, point
yeah.
of clarification on those 2022 dates. Is that the March or the November election in 2022?
It's the November election. It'll be for the November election.
Thanks.
In the Senate, you can see some similar interest on broadband and school facilities here. Lena Gonzalez from the Long Beach area has SB4 on her broadband legislation. Now, the important thing for you folks to know is while Aggie R. Curry includes community colleges in the grant program, Senator Gonzalez does not. And the Long Beach Community College system is already trying to reach out to her to talk to her about including the community colleges in the program for eligibility. So we'll see how successful they'll be into trying to secure that amendment. On SB 20, Senator Dodd has a bill related to CalFresh where he wants the Student Aid Commission to provide notice to all the students who receive a Board of Governors waiver to be informed of the benefits of the CalFresh program so they could potentially access the program. And similar to what Mr. O'Donnell's doing, Senator Glazer has his version of a facilities bond proposal, although it's a little bit broader in nature. It includes preschools, K-12, and all of public higher education, not just K-12 and community colleges as the O'Donnell bill does. His bond bill has a $15 billion appropriation in it. And the interesting thing is that he increases the bond capacity from 1.25% of taxable property to 2%. So he's increasing the capacity for the ability to access bonds or to have bonds in the local level. SB 61 by Senator Hurtado is a workforce training program bill. It's a new grant program that she wants to provide $50 million in grants to consortia that include local workforce development boards and community colleges and other stakeholders, which includes nonprofit or organizations. So those are the bills that were out in print that look interesting relative to community colleges. I should also mention that one of your delegation members, Assemblymember Holden, has introduced AB 102 and 103, I believe, and both those bills relate to dual enrollment. One of them is just a spot bill, and he hasn't figured out, he hasn't put in substantive language in it as of yet. And the second one is a dual enrollment bill to authorize county offices of education to offer dual enrollment programs with community colleges. There was some question whether county offices of education had the authority to enter into dual enrollment agreements. And there apparently is confusion out in the field as to whether that's allowable or not. And what's happened is that some counties have offered it and some counties have not because they think it's not authorized. So to clarify the miscommunication, Mr. Holden has introduced the bill to just, set the record straight once and for all.
Dale, my question about that is, given what county offices of education actually provide for education, meaning, continuation high schools, those kinds of things, I don't understand what the dual enrollment curriculum would be. Dual enrollment is supposed to be college level work.
Right. So what is it that they're offering? Yeah, what's the course? Because it can't really be a basic skills, or it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a college level
Right.
course.
We're not supposed to be offering basic skills classes.
So,
So from where I sit, the only thing it could possibly be is maybe career development or
CTE,
intro to college or something like that to county offices of education. It would be helpful to have an idea of exactly what types of classes haven't been able to offer. Because, we're not going to go and offer a whole academic program because that's not the student population.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're meeting with Mr. Holden, I believe, next week to get some clarification on this, because that's exactly what the question is. And because he has introduced it, and he's a member of your delegation, that we just want to
Yeah.
see if we could be helpful to him and to be a resource to him on these kinds of matters. So we'll learn more and we'll report back.
I just
Okay.
want to point out for the record that Trustee Wah dropped off the call about 3 minutes ago. We now don't have a quorum, but we don't have any
okay.
action items on the list. So that's
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Speaking of, I wish Holden would talk to Erica, before they do these things. It always bothers me when you don't go to resource.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, maybe there's something I'm not thinking of. Like maybe it's the County Office of Education wants to be able to do short-term career technical, and it's for their, I don't know. I just, knowing what I know about what county offices of education actually offer, it's a mystery to me why there would be a concern over dual enrollment. But it would be interesting to know what his thoughts are.
Because we're doing it now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost connection. So the county is concerned about dual enrollment? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Chris Holden has a new bill to extend authorization for dual enrollment programs to county offices of education. And my question is, what exactly would a county of office of education need to offer dual enrollment for? Because the types of programs they offer are continuation high schools and programs for folks who don't fit into other, more mainstream models of education. So it wouldn't be, we can't offer basic skills through dual enrollment. So what types of classes does his bill hope to offer? That was just my big question.
I understand, because I just had a briefing with his office, his rep yesterday from Hector. And it was really to extend for the juvenile hall people.
So that's what it's juvenile hall. But again, we have to look at, I would be curious to know what kinds of classes they're talking about.
Yeah, okay, well.
But that's good. Dale's going to meet with Holden's office next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty.
Thank you, Dale.
Okay.
The students are also here to talk about their own legislative priorities, and maybe it's time to turn the page on that under the same agenda heading of a state legislative update. So David or Mackenzie, would you like to kick it off?
Well, in terms of lobbying, I know Kelly can talk more about this, but we're still preparing our students, right? We don't want to go in and not be prepared. But I did want to ask though, since we do have Dale here, I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts on AB 2388, which is basic needs centers. And because I know that our AS and also the Student Senate, the statewide student government, we're very interested in finding an author to reintroduce that bill, because that would make providing basic needs very easy, and it would streamline getting students to those basisk needs very quickly. But I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that.
David, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so AB 2388 would establish a basic needs center at every community college, and it would provide funding for that, and it would require a basic needs coordinator, and basically this basic needs center would house resources to link students to on and off campus housing, food, and mental health services, and yeah, it would just put everything in one area and would provide funding for that.
Okay, that's good.
Did Mr. Berman say he was not going to introduce it this year, or what was the status from his office on this?
I'm not entirely sure because it hasn't been reintroduced yet.
Okay, I would start with his office to find out what's going on, because if he still is still interested, he may introduce it again. I'm just looking at the bill that you posted at it. Do you know, have you met with his staff or have the students met with him?
Not yet.
Okay. I think it's Ellen Hu, H-O-U is the consultant in that office. You might just ask her, try to reach out and ask her what the status is. But usually in situations like this, if a member introduces a bill and it didn't go anywhere, you know, the courtesy is to see if he or she's going to introduce it again. And if not, then you can find another author, but it's not appropriate to try to find another author if he or she is still planning to move the bill. So I would check that first.
When's the deadline again, Dale,
February 19th is the deadline for a bill to be in print, and January 22nd is the deadline to get proposals into legislative council to convert it to legal language.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but maybe you, if he isn't going to introduce, maybe you should talk to Anthony Portantino, and his seatmate is Susan Rubio, who's very much interested in education. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I would talk to Berman. He just did he just hosted the session on transfer, and I believe he did mention this bill. So I would.
Yeah, yesterday it was a session, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So folks, hot off the presses from the new federal dollars that are coming to community colleges, we are getting $30,076,671,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it looked good. We just got the briefing from ACCT today. It looked good so far. So we'll see.
That's great.
Yep.
No, congratulations.
Yay.
That's good. So,
David, was there more you wanted to get into today on the Sacramento priorities for the students?
That was all for me. I don't know if Kelly or Mackenzie, you want to mention anything.
Yeah, so I can go. So for the student lobby committee, we've been trying to essentially develop their skills. That was kind of our first priority. And now since the legislation cycle is starting again, there's a few bills that we've been looking at. A lot of them has to do with the CalFresh one is definitely something that we've been looking at, SB 20, as well as from Assemblymember Holden, he introduced something called AB 26, which is like peace officers use of force. Essentially, I think the main point of it is that peace officers that don't intervene in like wrongdoing actions of other peace officers would be, I guess, a part of that criminal activity of inaction. And something else that we're thinking of is probably also the peace officer requirement eligibility in terms of AB 89. AB 89 kind of just requires, I believe in terms of age, for them to instead of be 18 to be 25, along with like some other requirements, but just kind of raising the standard for peace officers. We did a lot of kind of like research and reaching out. I tried to reach out to, I did actually, to Office of Institutional Effectiveness, Ms. Crystal Colras. She's so awesome and supportive. She gave us some really good data, and a lot of it, essentially the basis of the data is essentially that 53% of our students have like an economic disadvantage, and that 53% of the Latinx community has an economic disadvantage. And since we're like a Hispanic X, serving institution, you can see the majority of the students and the ethnic base of that group has like economic needs, and that's kind of why we want to focus on bills like CalFresh and items like that. Yes, and then that's kind of the bills that are active that we're looking at, and then the bills that aren't active that have died before, but I like personally and some other students think could be interesting to reintroduce is AB 302, the homeless parking. And I know that maybe you guys have some memory of this. I'm not sure how you guys feel about this one. No. She's like shaking her head.
I'm not in favor of the homeless parking, but it does bring to question. So I haven't seen the sheets from the league yet on what the priorities are. I just saw they're coming out with the piece for ACCT. But are we planning on doing any sessions at all with the legislative advocacy coming up?
No, Linda, you and I talked about this. We agreed that we weren't going to do it during the
Right.
conference, but we were going to do it,
I'm just asking if we're going to have any legislative advocacy sessions. I didn't have to be during the conference.
Oh, yeah, we can
Yeah.
definitely set those up, and we want to set those up, especially as we're looking at the governor's budget and especially the early action piece. I think it would be good. I think it's just coming up with a time frame that works. Yep.
Right, and then just honing in on what we do consider to be the priorities for us, I think.
Well, I think from where I sit, two of the priorities are that in the early action piece, there's $100 million for basic needs. And I just want to make sure that that money is allocated according to FTES. And the reason I'm concerned about that was last year in the governor's budget, there was, $16 million or what have you for colleges to have food pantries. And the proposal at that time was that every college would get $100,000. Well, $100,000 for Pasadena City College and $100,000 for Compton College are two very different things. And so I just want to make sure that any discussion of those big pots of money are according to FTES, because we need to be able to provide those services at scale.
Good idea.
And then the second priority is that we need to work towards reforming the college promise, because the college promise is not equity minded. It requires that students be full-time students, and that is a white construct. That is a white privilege construct to college going behavior. And so if we're really going to have an E-shaped recovery here, then we've got to stop assuming that the only successful model for college going is full-time, because that's white privilege and it's racist.
Yeah, okay, so I think those are two good things for us to hone in on. I think the Student Services Center for Basic Needs Operations, I think that would be good for us to look at. My understanding is, okay, so there was money coming down for the workforce, also both at the federal level, I think the state level too.
Mhm.
Are you looking at that? Or?
Yeah, and that gets back to the bill I was Senator Hurtado's bill was trying to get 50 million more for local workforce development board to get into consortiums with community colleges. So that's non-Prop 98 money.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be federal money, and so that's a good opportunity.
Will it be? Do you think it'll be WIOA pass-through dollars?
It might be. I don't know a lot about the workforce side, but it's something definitely we're going to keep track of, because rarely do you see a bill in that side of the equation that specifically calls out community colleges. So I think that's a good opportunity.
Well, I think it's, after 20 years of begging the workforce investment boards and community colleges to work together, I think it's basically putting some skin in the game to encourage those partnerships.
Yeah.
So besides the usual suspects that we meet with, so some of them are Holden, some of them are Chow, would it be to our advantage to meet with others? So now Berman sponsored this transfer discussion, and the three chancellors across the higher ed systems were there. I thought sounded really promising. So I think we should really push for that. I mean, these intersegmental transfers I think are really important.
Yeah, I think so a couple of things. One is to keep an eye on that effort to see if there's going to be a bigger initiative coming out.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is with the eye, or the with just the knowledge that the COVID pandemic may reduce the scope of the session, put some emphasis on working with the budget people. And there's a new subcommittee chair in the education subcommittee in the Senate. It's John Laird, who used to be a trustee at Cabrillo College.
Yeah.
He was a former assembly member. He is now back in the Senate, and he's chairing the education subcommittee. So it'd be good to touch base with him on priorities, and because I think ultimately the budget is going to be where things
Yeah.
are going to happen again, because
Well,
they have to do a budget.
Well, going back to the students, I request for a basic needs center. I think that is a good idea. I think we have probably as close to one as you could get in terms of how we do support. My major piece on that is if we're going to push for it, it has to be ongoing, because for us to have to go back every single year and try to get level funding to keep that
Yes.
going is, so I'm all for it, but let's get ongoing funds. So we want to definitely push for that.
Right.
And on the priority list then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Was there anything else the students wanted to do? So ethnic studies is through. That was one of the things you guys had. What else
Yeah.
was on there?
Yeah, that was actually something I was going to bring up, because I know the ethnic studies AB 3310 died last time, and it was kind of sad because we saw the one for the CSU go through. I guess maybe they placed more emphasis on that one. I'm not sure exactly. I don't really know the reasoning, but I guess I don't know how
It's lower to us
Yeah.
too.
Well,
Everything.
the other thing is that because it went through on the CSU, and because the decision was made by the CSU Board of Governors, that is a lower division requirement, not an upper division requirement. It basically says to community colleges, you have to have ethnic studies. And so
Yeah.
at our last board meeting in December, we now have 12 classes that met the criteria, and they're in other departments, but what we were able to do is cross-list them so that we're ready for that to happen. So that's a good thing. The downside is that the categories in that Cal State bill are really limited. Like there's no intersectionality. It's like you need to take a class on African Americans, or you need to take a class on Indigenous people, or you need to take a class on Latinx. So I think part of the discussion, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but basically we now have it, and now we need to redo all of make changes to our ADTs to make sure that they're certified to meet their requirements. But we're actually in better shape in some ways than the Cal States are.
I see.
Yeah. And the LA district has a spot bill on ethnic studies for community colleges in case they need to build. They're working with the chancellor's office in case something is needed for whatever reasons. But everyone's sort of relying on, also the state chancellor's office is already revising its Title V regs to sort of conform to the CSU requirement. So so things are already in motion by virtue of the CSU bill. It's really sort of did a backdoor mandate on the community
on
colleges.
us. Yeah.
So
which is ironic because the Cal State faculty are not happy because they wanted it. Most of them wanted it to be at the upper level.
Right.
Understandably, because they already have those 9 units. I used to teach one of those 3-unit upper level GE, and literature and the rights of women, and success and values in American culture, I think would meet both of those requirements, but it was put at the lower level. So interesting.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's really good to hear, because I was kind of like, I guess I was like, oh, what about the UCs? What about the UCs? But if we incorporate that to the ADT, it wouldn't really be a big of a deal.
Yeah.
But the intersegmental bill is really designed to get the UCs on board with ADT. So that's good. That's a good thing that's going to get pushed, because that's the only way, since the UCs are in our Constitution versus under the Education Code.
Yeah, sounds like President Drake is really in favor of this too. So I think well.
Yeah.
So Dale, you don't think then that Marisucci is gonna, so he's not gonna do anything to?
No, he's going to move a bill, but I think he's sort of watching what everyone else is doing, and in case a bill is needed, he's going to he'll have it available as a vehicle. And similarly, you're talking about the college promise, Erica. Santiago's got a spot bill. He wants to extend college. I mean, this is the pie in the sky proposal. It's not, I don't think he has, he's recognizing the constraints with the budget, but the idea is to extend the college promise for community college students who go to CSU who have an associate degree from transfer get 2 years of free tuition.
No.
But the measure, well, I think what he's also looking at is he is using that as a vehicle for whatever happens when the Biden administration puts out their college promise proposals, so he could use that as a vehicle to implement whatever the feds come up with for the California promise. He wants it because, you know, he's the one that started. He's the author of the original college promise legislation.
Right. Oh, I remember. You know, that was his rallying cry.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, selfishly, I just don't want him to do the CSU's bidding. He should stay focused on us because that's where he came from.
Right. So
it makes sense for us to be with Chow and Holden and I guess Portantino.
Right.
I'm wondering what Portantino has on the table, and then also does it make sense for us to try and get a meeting with Berman then too?
If he has something, we should, you know what, let me talk to Ellen in his office to find out what's the next steps from that hearing and see where it's going. But yeah, let's find out.
Yeah, especially since he sponsored the intersegmental transfers. I think that's great.
Right.
Really tell him how supportive we are of this, and then
Yeah.
we can bring up the issue of the Basic Aid Student Center. What has Portantino got out that's in education?
You know, right now, he hasn't had any bills in print yet. So he's cut down his bill load since he became chair of appropriations because he has more leverage. He can put a lot of his amendments in any of these bills that come through his committee that get out. So he's had a relatively lighter bill load in recent years, but I'm sure he'll have some sponsored bills of his own to work with. So, but nothing in print right now. So that I've seen.
So besides the college promise money and refocusing that we might want to talk to him about, so he could be influential in appropriations on that.
Yes. Well, yeah, he's the key in appropriations.
Yeah. So let's kind of strategically decide what we're really going to push forward to some of these.
Well, I think too, pardon me, I think, Eric, I want to make sure you mention the deferrals, which is still sort of an outstanding issue as well. I don't know how much we want to try to push that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if they paid down our deferrals instead of having us take out $18 million.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing in the governor's proposal is for community colleges, he has $418 million in one-time funds allocated to all these little different pots.
Yeah.
You need 326 million to buy out the rest of the deferrals. So I've been asking the question, well, why didn't you, instead of spending 418 million on all these miscellaneous things, why don't you first spend 326 more and then take the balance and do the other things? But
yeah,
but it's a allocation game between the governor and the legislature. You know, the governor wants his signature on and get credit for a lot of these different programs, right?
Right.
That's what the issue is, right? Trying to get credit for putting pots in a little bit of money in a lot of different,
What about the broadband bills? Because I know the broadband issue really affected mostly the remote colleges, but LACSA just had a presentation last month on the digital divide, and we brought in Ed Trust West, and they showed the map, and there's a lot of areas even in LA County that are lacking broadband service. So is there anything we want to do to kind of push? Do we want to?
Yeah, so those bills, SB4 and AB14, are really important. And I think that's going to be a big priority for the legislature to get through. And then there's the Murasuchi bond bill, although I'm not sure where Department of Finance is going to be on a general obligation bond for broadband. They usually like to be using bond, 30, 15 and 30-year bonds for, more, for buildings. And I don't know that broadband really fits as a bond kind of financing issue. So I just don't know where finance is going to be on that concept. So, but definitely the Gonzalez bill and the Aguilar Curry bill has got to be got to really be pushed. And then again with SB4 to make sure community colleges are included, because, you know, if SB4 passes as it is, you won't even be able to apply for the money, which would be unfortunate.
So, so do we need to make that a focus? Do we need to make that a visit?
We definitely should make that a focus after we get all the bills in. We should make that a focus to look at the broadband category, see where all the bills are, and then come up
Yeah,
with
because the bills are all due by next Friday, right?
to be into council. Yes.
To be in, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll have a better sense after next Friday. What are
Right.
the bills we should be focusing on? Okay.
Yeah, which specific ones within. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And I know Jim just joined us. Jim, we're just going over the state legislative priorities. So I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to bring up.
Nothing to add, just listening in.
Okay. Okay, so are we done with state?
I have just a question. So that deadline for next Friday, is that therefore the deadline for any legislators to submit if they want to reintroduce something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If you miss that deadline, the next thing you could do is try to amend your stuff into another bill, but that's harder to do. So it's better to get your own proposal in, and then once you print it up, then you can find an author. So.
And I think maybe just one more, like, just to draw to your attention, because you mentioned Assemblymember Chue. I don't want to say her name wrong or his name wrong. I just seen it in print. It's AB 245. Essentially, it's called Educational Equity, Student Records Name and Gender Changes. To essentially kind of comb through everything for changes in terms of like maybe somebody changed their gender, changed their name, to update it accordingly to what they have on file at the federal level, or their official level. Yeah, that makes sense.
What was that number again?
I believe it's 245.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so if we're done with state, do we want to go on to federal?
I can provide the world's shortest federal update if you'd like.
Okay.
Just kind of where we are. Erica shared the news already about the federal dollars coming to us through CARES Part 2. And I think that's great news. I think we still have some learning to do about how we're supposed to spend that.
Yeah.
As Mike is fond of saying, the rules are in the process of being changed. And
The
I
only
think that's
the only thing we know about it is that we have to spend a minimum on direct student support of what we spent last time. So we know of the $30 million, a minimum of 7.6 million will be direct student aid.
right. More to be seen.
Yeah,
And I think
but we don't know
that's
the other rules.
right. And that's the general story overall. There's a lot of stuff happening in Washington, and
Mhm.
we're not going to know more until the new administration gets in, at least until there's more of a general sense of the landscape out there. And I think any effort to reach out to Judy Chu or Adam Schiff or anybody right now will get you the same story. That's kind of where we are at the moment, federally.
Yeah, and the only other thing I heard that was kind of different is some of that money can now be spent on professional development, which I guess is not the case last time.
Yeah, the only professional development you were allowed to do last time really was if you were doing, if you were doing training, like it was kind of circuitous. So yes, we're hoping that the language around professional development is a little more broad this time.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So yeah, I don't really recall anything hugely different. A lot of also a lot of money going to be redirected at the workforce issues.
Mhm.
So, but anyway, we're waiting for the green sheets to come out. So since our federal visits would have been planned in about sometime in February, and we see Adam and Judy often enough, but is there anyone else? I mean, should we be just thinking in the next couple of weeks about other targeted kind of visits for advocacy?
If I might, I feel like there's a moment here to get Alex Padilla. He's been at that Champions of College Opportunity thing for years and years, and now he has a very big seat. And it's good to remind him that we are one of those champions that he's at least shared some airspace with
Mhm.
for the past few years. So
Yeah,
there's
that's
an
a great idea.
Great recommendation, Alex, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Alex Padilla grew up in my neighborhood, so
Oh, really? Ah, that's cool.
All right. Well, we'll send all the big hitters in to kind of get his ear. So that's good. Anything else coming up then on federal? I'm trying to think of what came up this morning on ACCT.
Hmm.
Nothing comes to mind other than what I've already mentioned. Okay, so I think there's probably a little more to do, and then let's kind of figure out who we want to meet with. And does anyone else have any other federal issues? Did students have any federal issues?
Oh, I think for us, like I was meeting with Carrie the other day, and we are kind of just like sitting down and being like, okay, we're not really sure necessarily if we like on a student level if we're doing bills or necessarily just issues because we're not really sure what's going on up there right now. It's kind of hectic. I think someone that we would like to, or not we, I guess me because I'm here, probably recommend to contact is Adam Shift. He's always been super cooperative in terms of like talking to PCC and PC students. So.
Well, that is one thing, a few years ago when we met with him, we talked about the lunch program, and that is one of the issues on the green sheets. It's going to be coming up at the national level. So they
Mhm.
are going to be pushing that forward.
Yeah.
So if there's other things that, especially on basic aid and, the other thing I understand is they are, isn't Newsom going to be forgiving some of the student debt no, Biden's going to be forgiving like $10,000 of the student debt.
Well, we'll see if I think he's talked about it, but that's an appropriation. So he's got to do that as part of a budget thing. So I think we should always focus on Pell, getting Pell as large as it can be, flexible as it can be, even possibly extending lifetime Pell. We got formerly incarcerated, back in terms of second chance Pell.
So I think also there was information that was coming up to release money to assist our DACA students, which was kind of peeled back in the last few years. Let's see what comes out on the green sheets. But if I know that we have a fairly sizable DACA population, I believe, Erica.
Yep.
Yeah, so we should really look at what the impact is to us and what that means to our students, so we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Federal level.
Well, and we do have the Quest Center where we offer legal services to our DACA and undocumented students. And so if there was a way that we could, we could bring the federal piece in to bear, that would be good. Whatever we can do.
Yeah. Kelly, I'm sorry. Were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of add in terms of the Pell Grant, I definitely think I know Dr. Andrew Jonas earlier mentioned that the whole aspect or the idea of having full-time students and offering only full-time students all these aids.
Part-time Pell.
Exactly. It doesn't really make sense because a lot of this, like for me personally, next year I'm considering taking a year off just to work, and it wouldn't make sense to punish me in that sense of taking less units because I've already kind of taken all the units I need for my major and will still be a student. And it just, so I just kind of wanted to, for a student perspective, that I totally agree.
Yeah. And that's something that we've advocated for in the past, especially because for our CTE students, like if you're doing an EMT and your whole program is only 7 units, you don't, it's it's a one course certificate. It doesn't always qualify for Pell. And so it's those kinds of things we want to refine and make sure that Pell is distributed equitably.
Exactly. And I think it even it renders not renders, it prohibits some the more the students that want to do internships, maybe that are only offered in the spring and fall, and they can only take, let's say 3-4 units. So they're achieving, at that level and they're not able to get that financial support. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that will be on the green sheets, but yeah, we should definitely focus on that. And then there was some question as to whether or not the Higher Ed Act would be reauthorized, but it's sort of tentatively on the green sheets. Okay, so we have time to kind of come up with that. So let's just focus on what we need to get done with the state and then figure out when we want to have these meetings with our legislators. So we have at least maybe 4 or 5 that we want to meet with. Anything else people want to come up with? That's it?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, all right. Well, good. And good to have such great student representation on there, and did a lot of your homework, Kelly. Good job. All right. Okay, we'll see you guys at the next.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, have a good day.
Take care.